My name is Brittany Mellinger. I am the Fair Housing Training and Outreach Coordinator for the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and you are in Session 2A, Fair Housing Focus, a lightning round. So we've got a 90-minute session, which will feature 7 different speakers who will present on different topics about a wide variety of issues that impact access to housing. So we know that these are big topics, and our speakers are experts that could go way longer than 10 minutes, but this is designed to just give you an intro. And please connect with our speakers throughout the event to learn more about their topics of expertise. In the interest of time, I am not going to read everyone's full bios to give everyone as much time as possible, but their bios are in the program, and there's even some further updates in the digital program. So I know in the main room there's a QR code, and you can check that out there as well. So with that being said, each of our speakers will have 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for a question or two if anyone has any follow-up questions before we move on to the next speaker. So let's get started. First up, I've got Rachel Shepard, the Executive Director of the City of Pittsburgh Human Relations Commission, and she is joining us to speak about housing status as a protected class, improving stability, and reducing recidivism. So welcome, Rachel. Oh. All right, here's your marker.
Nice. Ooh, the technology is so nice here. Good morning. My name is Rachel Shepard. I'm the Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. If you are familiar with the State Commission on Human Relations, we are the same kind of entity, but on the Pittsburgh local level. So we do the same kind of investigation of discrimination complaints, outreach, education, all of those sorts of things, but geared towards the Pittsburgh City Code and those specific protections. So as Brittany mentioned, I'm here to talk about housing status as a protected status today. We are looking at adding this to our Pittsburgh City Code to better protect people in a time of turbulence and lots of housing issues, right? So what am I talking about when I'm saying housing status? We wanted to open this conversation with homelessness specifically, and then expanded that to other sorts of things as well. So what we're looking at, this is a definition from the Cook County, Illinois ordinance that they created. There were a few people that have done this before us, and we are leaning pretty heavily on them for any kind of guidance and precedence. Okay, I'm gonna try to not make that squeal. So with housing status, we're talking about, what is it? Closer to the mic? Okay. Sorry, I'm always like, All right, so with housing status, we're talking about not having a fixed residence. We're talking about now, right now, whether you have a fixed residence or if at some point in your past you have had a period of being unhoused or not having a fixed residence. So this definition also includes things like whether it is an owned home or if it's rental and other things like that. We're looking to expand our definition just kind of based on the other entities that have done this housing status protection before us, and I'll cover those in a minute. But when we're looking at housing status in the city of Pittsburgh, the data that we have is a little dated. It's a point in time count from the Allegheny County when they did this in January of 2024. So in January 2024, we're looking at 857 people who were living in shelters and 169 that were living unsheltered or street homeless. And again, this is a point in time count. This is not representative of the way that things are currently or maybe even at that time, right? We're looking at what they were able to collect at that time. And so when we're talking about folks being unhoused, that can cover a number of different things. So we talked about the street homelessness. We're looking at tent encampments, living on different people's couches if you're couch surfing, living in your car. This is not a fixed residence. It's not determined to be permanently habitable for a human being or a family in some situations. We're also looking at folks that are in transitional housing, so in a shelter system, or in transitional medical housing. The transitional medical housing is technically covered as a disability protection in housing if we're talking about discriminating against folks who are coming from a medical facility, but we wanted to be more explicit, more inclusive, and that will include them as well, because again, if it's transitional, it's not a fixed residence, and they could be denied tenancy because they didn't have a fixed residence before and they're coming from somewhere more transitional. So the National Alliance to End Homelessness does a regular review, a poll of the public on their opinions and views on homelessness. And from that, there was a lot of really interesting information. What I found to be more interesting is that people are recognizing that the amount of folks that are entering a state of being unhoused is increasing, and that it is not keeping up with the number of folks that are actually exiting being the unhoused state. So what is the cause of this? There are a number of different things. Here in Pittsburgh, we're looking at housing affordability. We're looking at a dilapidated housing stock. There are so many different things. We at the commission are focused on discrimination. So what we're looking at is finding a way to keep people from being turned away as a tenant because they have a period of being unhoused on their record. They should be basing this in actual risk. Anyone can be unhoused at any time for any reason. If folks have not read the book Evicted by Matthew Desmond, please do. It is very enlightening as to how quickly and simply you can become unhoused, even if you're trying to do all of the right things. The why. Again, we're looking at folks that are being turned away from housing in a place where we don't have enough affordable housing to go around. It is hard enough to get a stable place to live and to afford that place to live in a way that keeps you there on a permanent basis. So that is absolutely number one. We as an agency, an anti-discrimination agency, cannot cover source of income in Pittsburgh. This made it all the way to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and was struck down as regulating business. Now, Mayor Gainey did just sign an executive order stating that anyone who does business with the city of Pittsburgh to receive money for development must not discriminate against people on their source of income. So we will be able to enforce that. We are looking at, a few years down the line now, because we're talking about anyone who's entering into a contract right now with the city, that will be a provision. But in terms of, receiving housing assistance, Section 8, any other kind of rental assistance that you might be getting, they can still turn you away on that basis. Now, why would they do that? They find you to be unstable. They might say that it is inherently a risk if you need to be using housing assistance to whether you're a good tenant or not. And that's prejudicial. We don't approve of that, and we don't agree with that. So we're saying, again, anyone can become homeless at any time. Let's not keep people out of stable housing and in a way that's going to keep them on this road of the transitional housing. When we're talking about the housing, we're also talking about ending criminal recidivism. So I believe the statistic is about 68% of folks who are re-entering society from being incarcerated return to that criminal activity within 3 years. That is drastically reduced if they have stable housing. Why? If you have a permanent address, you can get employment. If you have employment, you have steady income. If you have steady income, you have no reason to commit some of the crimes that are putting people in the prison system. We need to be ensuring that the most basic of life needs, that hierarchy of needs, is being met so that people can go out and be valuable members of society and stop being treated as if they are less than simply because something happened to them, likely something that they could not control, that led them to being unhoused. Economic efficiency. So the county, Allegheny County, is spending a mass amount of resources to get folks off the street. That is wonderful. We don't want people on the street if they don't have to be. We want people to be safe and stable and on their way to getting into a more permanent housing situation. But the amount of funding that's going towards that could be used somewhere else, right? So if we're talking about finding a way to keep people get people into housing and keep them there, then that will help reduce that financial burden. And finally, we look in particular at the intersectionality of other protected classes. So the city of Pittsburgh has protections for disability. We have protections for race and national origin. We have survivor of domestic violence protections in housing. And if you can see on the chart here, which is also from the county, I have the sources cited there, but substance use disorder is absolutely at the top. We can understand that. That is something that is not always a choice for folks. Like, they don't choose to get into that life, and it is very difficult to get out once you get there. And I want to point out that folks that are in active recovery are covered under the disability basis for discrimination. But you can see the criminal history, inability to locate affordable housing, but then mental health issues. If you can't get a stable place to live and you can't get a job to pay for things, how are you getting insurance to manage your mental health needs? Eviction is a big one, but here in Pittsburgh, we thankfully have a number of different programs that are geared toward solving that problem. We have the Lawyer of the Day program, Just Mediation Pittsburgh, that does eviction mediations for folks that are willing to come to terms with that. We have Rent Help PGH. They provide all the rental assistance and many other programs. I don't mean to keep anybody out of that. But there are so many different things on here that can be intersectional with what we're already protecting, and how housing status is one of those things that can be a catch-all for anything that might slip through the cracks. I mentioned the Trailblazers. I'll go through these very quickly. Washington, D.C. was the first place to have this protection. They implemented it in 2023, so unfortunately they didn't have any statistics for me when I went looking for them, but they do have all of their information on their website. It is an extensive piece of ordinance. Very, very involved. So we are leaning very heavily on that as a precedent, but again, first-class city, so we want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind. Cook County, Illinois, also with their Office of Civil Rights, or I'm sorry, Human Rights. They have housing status in housing. Oh, and I glossed over it, but in DC, they covered this not just in housing, but in employment, education, public accommodations, and government services, which ideally I would like to do, but we're going to start it off with housing because we know that that's going to have the greatest impact on the greatest level. And then finally, Madison, Wisconsin, their Department of Civil Rights, they have homelessness protections in employment, housing, and public accommodations. How many times have you seen somebody kicked out of a public space because they're carrying all their belongings on their back? You can't just assume that because somebody is carrying everything that they own with them to try and be safe and not lose any of those possessions, that they're automatically a risk to your business. That is prejudice. What is the bottom line? Housing status should not be a factor in whether a housing provider is determining if you're a good tenant or not. It is not a catch-all for, okay, you're unhoused, so you're definitely unstable. You are absolutely not going to be a good tenant. There is higher risk here. It's just not. We need to be considering everybody on an individualized basis, criminal history or not, and really focusing on the fact that housing is a human right and everybody deserves to have it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rachel. Are there any questions? If you have one, please feel free to come up to the center aisle or raise your hand and someone will bring a mic around to you.
Hi, my name's Haley. I work at Rent Help PGH, so thanks for the shout out. I am just wondering, I know you said you're trying to, add this as an ordinance? I was just wondering what that process looks like. Is this something that will go through city council, and will there need to be advocacy efforts and things like that around it? I'd just like to know more about the process.
Yeah, for sure. Because we are governed by the Home Rule Charter, the commission has the ability to add protections to the city code. And so we do that on a regular basis. We actually added medical marijuana patient protections at the end of 2024. It's just happening all the time because discrimination evolves. So we can add this. What we typically do is we'll draft legislation. We work with our attorneys to do that. We work with the law office of the city to do that. We get it into city council. We make sure that there's enough time for public comment and discussion before we get it through through, but that's ultimately how it happens, and we can add it to the Pittsburgh City Code, and then that is something that we as an agency can enforce.
All right. Well, thank you,
Thank
Rachel.
you.
All right, next up, we have David Dean, who is the president-elect of the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. Yeah. So he'll be speaking about the impacts of the National Association of Realtors settlement. All right.
Oops, I need my glasses, sorry. So I just want to say it's an honor to be here. I was here during the first conference, and I've had a great time. And this one especially is a passion of mine. What I'm going to be talking to you about for today, first off, my name is David Dean, and I am presently the president-elect of the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. I've also been a champion and advocate for fair housing. I presently sit on the National Association's Committee on Fair Housing. I sat on and chaired for many, many years the DEI committee at the state level and at the local. I'm also an instructor on fair housing as well, so my passion runs deep with fair housing. But I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. As you know, the housing market has gone through several changes in the past year. Specifically, last year, the National Association of Realtors announced changes in the way realtors conduct their businesses, and it's important for home buyers and sellers to be aware of them. The changes emphasize transparency for consumers and fully informing them about how their agent will be compensated for their professional services. These changes, of course, will impact how buyers work with their agents. First, properties listed for sale in the multiple listing service database, otherwise known as MLS, will no longer advertise an offer of compensation for buyer agents. And in order to work with a buyer agent, home buyers will be required to sign a written agreement with their agent prior to touring a home. This will ensure that the buyer will know exactly what the services will be provided and also at what cost. As you may be aware, consumers are and always have been able to negotiate their real estate agent's compensation. This means that while buyer and seller agents customarily have received compensation for their services by splitting a commission, agent compensation has always been negotiable. One of the greatest challenges facing many buyers in Pennsylvania is the lack of housing inventory. According to some estimates, Pennsylvania has nearly 100,000 fewer homes than it needs. Within the industry, we've seen a number of homes listed for sale drop by nearly 50% compared to just 5 years ago. Not only is inventory short, but the statewide median home sale price is also up more than 50%, with prices around $264,000. These numbers reflect what potential home buyers are experiencing in the real estate market today. The National Association of Realtors recently released its Snapshot of Race and Home Buying in America report. While Black home ownership rates saw the highest annual gain among all races last year, increasing to 44.7%, it remains substantially lower than white homeownership rates at 72.4%, Asian homeowner rates at 63.4%, and Hispanic homeownership rates at 51%. The report also shows that nearly half of all renters spend more than 30% of their income on rent. And in most states, Black renters face greater affordability challenges than their white counterparts. The national report also asked recent home buyers if they had experienced or witnessed discrimination during their real estate transaction. The most common discrimination for Black Americans at 44% and Asian Pacific Islanders at 33% home buyers was the type of loan product they were offered. 39% of Hispanic buyers believe their purchase offer was denied for possibly discriminatory reasons, and Black home buyers were most likely to report witnessing or experiencing more strict requirements for themselves. The Pennsylvania Association of Realtors and the National Association of Realtors continues to be committed to fair housing, requiring fair housing training for our members, providing additional education, and ensuring that everyone is treated fairly in both the home buying and the selling process. Again, thank you very much. Phew, dodged that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So our next speaker actually was not able to make it unexpectedly today. It was going to be Tammy Thompson, who is the founding executive director of Catapult Greater Pittsburgh, but I understand one of her colleagues is here to stand in for her. All right, fantastic. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Gabby. All right, please welcome Gabby.
Yeah, I remember earlier when I was like, you'll see Tammy, get excited. You get me. So, and I'll be honest, I think there's a PowerPoint, but like, I'm not sure. So bear with me. The green button. Okay, cool. But hi, everybody. Gabby DeMarchi again with Catapult Greater Pittsburgh. I'm the director of equity protection there. And I'm also short, so sorry. Okay. So we did a little bit of the Catapult spiel if you were here earlier, but here's our awesome team, again, based in East Liberty, but serve Allegheny County. The primary focus is to essentially advocate to ensure systematically disenfranchised communities can meaningfully achieve economic justice and generational wealth through our programming. So we have several different categories: our entrepreneurship category, home ownership, support and connection, policy and advocacy, and then equity protection, which is the work that I do with our CLEAR program, which is the primary focus of what we're here today to talk about those tangled titles a little bit that we talked about earlier this morning. And I'll get into it a little bit more and kind of define some terms and do all of that good stuff. But just to kind of briefly run through some of our programming. So we have our entrepreneurship program, a bunch of different kind of entities to that program, but essentially, basically we have a group of cohorts that we work with, a retail-based cohort and then a culinary-based cohort that go through curriculum that want to start up their small businesses. We have a commercial kitchen in Bellevue that our culinary-based cohort members can use. And then we have retail space in the Hill District where our our cohort members can sell their goods and products out of. We also have a couple of retail residency-based programs where we help support business owners in getting in a brick and mortar space. So Serenity Bloom is a flower shop that we help support on the north side. And then Amehi is a fashion designer that's on Penn Ave in East Liberty that we also help support. So definitely check out those small business owners. They're great. And then our homeownership and financial education. So we have many different programs through this. We love an acronym at Catapult, so please feel free to check out all of the acronyms that we have. But essentially, they're all based around the financial education of becoming a homeowner. So wherever you're at on that journey in that space, we can kind of meet you where you're at. We have a great group of financial counselors who do a lot of financial counseling via Zoom, but also looking to get back in person. There's an intake form on our website if you're interested in, becoming a part of that program. So all you have to do is complete that, and then we'll get you connected to the right people. But yes, many pre-purchase, post-purchase, all the things. We have all the things. And then our support and connection piece, primarily we have our day one program, which is again, similarly a cohort, primarily women, many who are single moms or have kids that are looking to kind of just be a part of whatever journey and next step that they're looking in their lives, whether it's going back to school or, finding the right career choice, whatever it may be. But essentially it's kind of workshop-based, cohort-based, where, a group of women can kind of come together and get that support and connection that they might need on their journey. We also do some poverty simulations too. It's been a bit, but Tammy is really great in running those. And I think there's one happening later today. I'm not quite sure. But essentially working with people through an actual simulation of, okay, you're on food stamps, what does that mean? Or you have some generational wealth from your family members, what does that mean? And kind of going through those steps of, depending on what you're given, kind of what journey the process can be. So yeah. And then we have equity protection, which is my little realm here. So again, another acronym. So here to promote CLEAR, which is the acronym stands for Clinic for Legal Equity and Repairs. So primarily what we do is, and what we focus on, are people who are living in their homes, taking care of their properties, doing all of that stuff, but title is not in their name. It is in a deceased family member's name. Cousin, uncle, brother, grandma, whomever. And for whatever reason, they don't have title to the property, whether there wasn't a will or there was a will and it wasn't probated. So we are working with people throughout Allegheny County to help resolve these title-based issues. We have a consulting attorney that we work with, but we also have a group of volunteer attorneys as well that are kind of helping us support this work. The program is still new. We're about a year old, so we're still kind of working out kinks and building more partnerships and connections. So it's been great and fruitful in that sense. But essentially, we go through the process transactionally. So what that means is we don't litigate, we don't go to court by any means, but we work with all of the living heirs of the person that has passed away to sign off on a deed and say, yes, Gabby can have title to the property. And it's a really interesting process because sometimes family members might not want to sign a deed, or we recently are working with someone who has family members that live in Bangkok. So how do we get them to sign a deed? And we have experience with all of these kinds of scenarios. So definitely getting a little bit more comfortable with the kind of the mediating process. I'm a social worker, so learning some of those important skills to be able to do that. But then also we have a really great group of volunteer students and others that can kind of help us make connections with people that might not be in the region or the Pittsburgh area. So we are able to accomplish this. It just takes some time, right? So typically we say that this process can take about 18 months, pending on what the situation might be. I'm gonna go to the next slide. I can't remember quite what, okay. So typically we also just like to define some terms. So here on the left-hand side, title, so that's the legal concept of property ownership, and then a deed is that legal document that confirms ownership. Sometimes we get a question of well, what's the difference? One's a concept, one's the piece of paper that you get, right? So it's kind of all the same in that sense. And then I think we kind of ran through this too. Tangled title is a phrase used to describe problems related to legal ownership of real estate. It's legal jargon. It's honestly a marketing term that came out of Philadelphia, so we utilize it here. But essentially, if you live in a home, consider yourself the homeowner, but your name is not on the deed, you may have a tangled titled situation. And to also just paint a picture of our program, we're working in Allegheny County. We don't have income guidelines, so we will work with you. We recognize that there are barriers. If you're just right above a lot of these income guidelines, you still can't access the resources that you might need. So know that that is part of the program too. So again, just going back to the title stuff, you could have a tangled title if your name is not on the deed to your house. You are the only person who has interest living in the house, but your name is not on the deed. or one of your relatives own the house you live in and their name is on the deed, but they have since passed away. And then just highlighting why it's important to have title. Like, why do we need this? If we're living in our home and taking care of the taxes, like, why does it really matter? And here are kind of some reasons why it is important. So if you want to take out a mortgage or a loan and your name isn't on the deed, they're not going to work with you. The ability to get on a tax payment plan. There are some people that will work with you to get on these payment plans, but some not. So having title on your name is important for that. This is probably the biggest one that we see, access to apply for home repairs, utility assistance, or weatherization programming. In Allegheny County, I'm not sure about, other counties you all might be in, but we have a lot of really great resources for home repairs, but often they require that you have title to the property before they're willing to work with you. So that's, where we kind of come in. The ability to sell your home. If you want to sell it, we got to get you on title, right? The ability to get property insurance, and the ability to get real estate tax payment exemptions. So in Allegheny County, there are a couple exemptions for county taxes, the Homestead Exemption Act, which everyone in Allegheny County has access to, and one of the others that we often help people complete the application for is Act 77, which is the Senior Citizens Tax Relief Program. If you're over a certain age, you also have access to county tax breaks. So we want to make sure that you're accessing those, and if you don't have title, you can't. So how can Catapult help? So I kind of talked about the first one, work with a consulting attorney to transfer title to your home. So we have a consulting attorney that we work with. Her name is Irene Clark. We also are building a group of volunteer attorneys. So that's why I kind of did my spiel earlier of like, if you know any other attorneys, please let me know because we want to work with you if you're interested. We also are providing home repairs for people who are a part of our title-based programming. So if you are receiving our legal services, we're offering home repairs. And we're doing some pretty big stuff, bigger than what we thought we'd be able to do. We are redoing roofs. We are fully redoing plumbing. We are rewiring electrical. We are redoing HVACs. So we are doing some really cool, meaningful stuff that has been awesome to see. So if, you know someone that's dealing with these title-based issues and is in need of home repairs, please send them to us. And then lastly, and this piece is still a little bit kind of in the budding process, is getting estate planning documentation taken care of. So we recognize that how do we stop the cycle of this by, getting a will and getting other estate planning documentation. So we want to work with people to get those wills completed, to get that paperwork completed so they have a plan for the future of the home so they can continue to build that generational wealth. So that's still in a budding phase of process, but again, any attorneys out there that want to help, let me know. So just wanted to highlight this too. There are no eligibility requirements, but we have our priority areas. So individuals and families over the age of 62, heirs of deceased primary homeowners or record owners. So if you're the direct descendant of that person that has passed away, caregivers of children 18 and younger, veterans or widowers or veterans, and then obviously with the overall primary focus regarding the preservation of Black home ownership. And yeah, I think this kind of just like breaks down, honestly, everything that I've already talked about outside of the legal work, also the home repair stuff and the estate planning. And then, so essentially we have an application online. It's pretty simple and short in my opinion, but it's really, really helpful for us to get some of that additional information up front. So I can review it and then our attorneys can review it as well to make sure that there's a good fit. But if you cannot access the application for whatever reason, happy to do it with you over the phone, happy to get you paper copies, whatever is easiest. Please let us know. But my contact information is here at the bottom. We're also out tabling with my coworker Kayla, and I have business cards there as well, so happy to get that to anybody. And then, yeah, this is some just general Catapult information. If you want to follow us on social media or shoot us an email, please feel free to. But thank you so much.
All right, I think we've got time for one question, if there's any questions in the audience.
Do you have to, if your heir left you the home and your name, does that mean like we wouldn't be qualified to talk to you about putting our name on the title, or do we automatically get a title if we?
Yeah, so, and again, not an attorney, so I'll do my best. So primarily the people that we are working with are people that, yes, so like they are an heir to the home, but they don't have title to the property. They don't have a path to gain that title to the property, if that makes sense. So we, work with a lot of people that their family member did not have a will. So, what happens if you don't have that documentation and how do you obtain title? We also work with people that did have wills and then they just weren't probated or they didn't go through the process of listing the wishes of the person that passed away. So I'm not sure, but if you want to talk more about it, happy to give you my business card and we can chat further about your specific situation. But yeah, primarily we're working with people that, they are an heir to the property. There's just not a clear path as to how they can gain title to the property, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
I'll talk to you later.
Cool, sounds good.
All right. Thank you
Thanks
again,
so
Gabby.
All right, next up we've got Stephanie Meyer. She is the Special Assistant to the Secretary in the Department of Human Services. Welcome, Stephanie.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So I'm Stephanie Meyer. I have the honor of serving as a special assistant to Secretary Dr. Val R. Cush at Pennsylvania Department of Human Services. And I have been working hand in hand with colleagues with the Governor's Office, with the Department of Community and Economic Development, and the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency to develop Pennsylvania's first statewide housing action plan, which we're really excited to tell you about this morning. So over the last couple of years, Governor Shapiro and the administration have been laser focused on delivering results for Pennsylvania. We're really proud that we've been able to increase FAIR, or the State Housing Trust Fund it's often known as, up to $100 million over the next 4 years. We've been able to double the tax credits for the Neighborhood Assistance Program, which is a really powerful part of affordable housing. We've also been able to increase the Homeless Assistance Program that can do eviction prevention, emergency shelter, and other services, $5 million last year, which was exciting. It was the first new investment in that program in over 15 years. We've been able to launch mixed-use development pilots and do some other really great things, like a brand new Right to Counsel program for folks who are facing eviction to try to help them preserve that tenancy. We believe that the best home that is affordable is the one you're already in. So we want to protect Pennsylvanians to be able to stay in place. So in September, Governor Shapiro signed an executive order directing the Department of Community and Economic Development, or DCED, to work with my agency as well as others to develop this first statewide housing action plan. There's only about 3 other states in the nation who've really undertaken something like this, so we want to be ahead of the curve and recognize the important role that the state can play in supporting affordable housing across the board for folks at all income levels. And we know that in a changing federal landscape, this is more important than ever, so it's very timely. The 6 areas of focus that we've been really looking at is the building of new housing units. We all know it. We've underbuilt for decades, and we're paying for it. The affordability is an issue for folks across income levels, and we have to really prioritize getting new units online. We want to preserve the existing housing that we do have, keep it affordable for folks who have a subsidy in place, as well as homeowners and renters. We want to make housing more affordable. We've done some great things like expanding the PA property tax and rent rebate, but we want to do more to cut costs for Pennsylvanians across the board. And we want to support vulnerable populations. At the Department of Human Services, we serve over 3 million Pennsylvanians directly through programs we oversee, like medical assistance, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, LIHEAP for home energy efficiency and help with winter heating bills. Speaking of which, we just extended the deadline to April 18th. Anyone who still needs it, please apply. And we want to ensure equity in housing outcomes. We know that redlining and a variety of factors have made it so that there is unequal access. And as Catapult just talked to us about, there's really unequal preservation with being able to retain that generational wealth if you have these issues. So we want to embed equity throughout our plan, and we want to achieve operational excellence. We know that housing programs and interventions are often incredibly siloed. And in candor, it's often pretty hard to find the information. We heard again and again, it's hard to know what's out there, it's hard to get to it. How do I make this easier? So we want to think about doing that, and our partners at the state working better with one another and with partners at all levels of government and public-private. I thought there was some more, but I think I might be going backwards instead of forwards. Let's see, what am I doing? Okay, here we go. Thanks. So we've hosted over 15 regional roundtables. We were able to do one with PHRC a few months ago with some of their stakeholders. We've had almost 2,500 survey responses to our survey. We have a plan and we have a hub site. I will put at the end, and I think you'll be able to get these, but if you Google Housing Action Plan Pennsylvania, I assure you it's the first result. And there is a link at the end of the presentation where you can come to our website and learn more, or send us any information through our resource account email address. So some of the themes that we heard are things you've already been hearing this morning, but just wanted to lift a few of them up. We really did hear that we need more education on tenant and landlord rights and responsibilities. This stuff is hard. It's really complex, like knowing the eviction processes, what are the rights, it plays out a little bit differently in jurisdictions throughout the Commonwealth, and how do we get help? So we really need to do more education on this eviction process and help people navigate these complicated systems. We want to make sure there is funding for home repairs, and we need wraparound services for certain at-risk populations, like people experiencing homelessness, people with disabilities, and older adults. And I'll just point out the local capacity, and we'll talk about that a little bit further in a moment. So in the governor's proposed 25-26 budget, we have a few down payments on the future of the Housing Action Plan. So we're proposing a new $10 million fund for first-time home buyers to help more people achieve that goal of having their own home. We're continuing to increase the FAIR State Housing Trust Fund to a higher amount faster. We are looking at $50 million for a new housing stock restoration program, making critical home repairs, building upon some of the best of whole home repairs, but also making some changes to it to make it easier to use. And the next one, which I'm really excited about, is staffing up the State Planning Board, which is an advisory group at the state level. We're proposing to put $1 million in there that is primarily going to go to staff to help work with local communities, municipalities, to develop capacity, to help develop more affordable housing, to look at their policies, to look at permitting, zoning. We want to also work to introduce a housing ready qualification so that any folks who are coming to the state seeking state funding, we're going to be looking to say, okay, are you a housing ready community? Have you taken some steps to lower barriers to housing? Have you looked at your zoning reforms? Have you looked at permitting? Have you looked at land use? How are you making it faster, quicker, easier to build more housing? And we, the state, want to work with partners who are committed to that same effort. And the governor also called for sealing eviction records for folks who have not, in fact, been evicted. As he noted in his budget address, it's common sense. And it is something that is a black mark on so many of our folks who are trying to seek new housing. So we want to preserve that. And last, but certainly not least, we want to create an interagency council on homelessness, which is something that is near and dear to my heart, and we really believe will make a difference in serving vulnerable Pennsylvanians who often are homeless for a variety of factors, but simply because we do not have enough affordable housing. So next steps, we've been on this big stakeholder engagement phase. We've been looking at data. We've met with, I mentioned 15 roundtables along with some specialty ones. We've been gathering a lot of suggestions. Our list is well over 150. And now we're working on looking at that and really fine-tuning, developing that plan, assessing the effectiveness of our existing plans, and working on a deliverable. The governor gave us 1 year. We're trying to get it done before that, so we're aiming for summer 2025 for the release of this plan. And in this, I do believe on that last one, when Brittany sends it out or when it's available online, it does have a link to our Housing Action Plan website. So please, we hope you'll engage with us, let us know what Pennsylvania needs, and look forward to this developing and making it better, easier, and faster for more Pennsylvanians to afford housing in the future. Thank you so much.
Any questions for Stephanie? Hold on, we're gonna bring a mic to you.
So they can hear you back here.
Thanks again, Stephanie. That was great. I have a question about the 10 million for first-time home buyers because I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, and that is definitely the struggle. Being a HUD housing counselor and a realtor, a lot of our clients, I mean, some of them have a good savings, but some don't. Most of our single parents, you know, things like that. I just wanted to know what will be the requirements, you know, for, is that going to be a grant? How long is it going to be forgiven? Things like that.
Yeah. So for this, I would really note it's a new initiative, and so we are in fact seeking input on what it looks like. Folks have told us that some of the eligible things they'd like to see in something like that could be help with the down payment and closing costs. We've also heard some folks suggest, can you give us flexibility to buy down points so maybe your interest rate over time is more affordable? So we're open to suggestions on this. As we noted, it's a new initiative. We're kind of fleshing it out, but we're excited because we really want to expand that access. So if you have suggestions for us, please get in
I'm
contact.
all for it. I will.
Thanks.
Hi, Stephanie. My name's Megan. I'm the Executive Director of the Fair Housing Partnership of Greater Pittsburgh. We came up really close into almost going into a jury trial on a housing provider that serves seniors in the fair market statewide. 5 properties in Western PA and 1 in Erie, and then 2 or 3 in the Scranton area. And both cases and litigation have been about disability discrimination. So we settled and they retrofitted all the multifamily housing properties to be fundamentally accessible. And now we are close to changing their reasonable accommodation policies for the seniors who needed an assigned parking space. So just to ask, is there any conversations happening in the plan and considerations at the state level for addressing fair housing or housing discrimination specifically in the market across the Commonwealth?
Yeah, we certainly have been engaging with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and other partners to think about what options could be out there. So I would say this is an area where we still are soliciting suggestions, but it comes up again and again. And as I'm sure you and some others are aware, disability-related discrimination is absolutely the #1 most common. So I think some of this too could be, I mentioned there's a changing federal landscape, which I know can have a lot of uncertainty and some scariness to it in terms of some potential or likely or real cuts. But I also note that whenever these things happen, there's a chance to also try to positively affect policy. So my hope is that we can also engage with the federal government about some of these regulations and policies at that level too. Sometimes we really saw, during the first Trump administration, there was some excellent things that happened with supports to youth experiencing homelessness. The second Bush administration was the time that Housing First was embraced, and folks don't recall that. So I hope that we can also have an opportunity to positively affect policy at the federal level in this new environment. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Lauren Berman, who is a senior staff attorney at the Pennsylvania Utility Law Project. So welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Let's see. Yes, very good. Okay. Yes, my name is Lauren Berman. I'm a senior staff attorney at Pulp, is probably how you hear us referred to. Contact information there. QR code gets you to our newsletter, which we would love everyone to sign up for. Also, our website has a lot of resources on it, client-focused resources for the most part. So we are a statewide legal service provider, so we work, with the exception of Philadelphia, because we work in partnership with Community Legal Services in Philly. We handle individual clients anywhere in Pennsylvania. Our mission is to secure just and equitable access to safe and affordable utility service for Pennsylvanians experiencing poverty. And we do legal representation, both groups and individuals, education and training, policy advocacy, and I can't remember the last 2 bullets, and they're covered by the thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about what right do tenants have to utility service. And the scope of this is going to be when, as a tenant, service is not in your name. So there could be a lot of reasons for that. Most landlords will keep water services in their name, water, sewer, because that's often connected to a municipality. They could, the properties can get liened, and so typically landlords will keep that account for themselves. Also, if you're in a multifamily building, if each unit isn't individually metered, you're not permitted to have service in your name as a tenant. So we're just going to be talking about circumstances where the tenant does not have their own account with the utility company. If you are working with anyone that does have their own account with the utility company and still has questions or issues, you can come find me. So utility service in Pennsylvania falls into two large buckets. You have the PUC regulated utilities and then the unregulated utilities. They're still regulated, there are still laws, they're just not the same ones. So for PUC regulated utilities, that's mostly who you're thinking about, like regionally, who I have listed up there. If you have issues with them, you can go to the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission and file complaints. There's a complaint process, an appeals process, a mediation process. So that would be your venue for most of those complaints. There are very specific rules around billing, collections, and there are very specific programs that they must have to support low-income households. Whether they're sufficient or not, but they do exist, and people at particular income levels should have equal access to those programs. So that's another thing we work on. If you are working with someone who is trying to get into a program and they can't, that would be a great question for us, and we can get some answers. Everything else, you're talking about the thousands of municipal authorities in Pennsylvania. There's 2,000 or 3,000 separate little municipalities. Some serve 10,000 people, some serve 500 people. You're talking about Wilkinsburg, Penn Joint, Westview Water, Capital Region, and Harrisburg. These are not regulated by the PUC. So there are laws that they have to follow. We're going to talk about the specific tenant rights ones, but there are not standard billing collection termination standards. They are not required to give any particular time of notice. They are not required to give you a payment arrangement. They are not required to have any sort of assistance program. So when you're dealing with sort of the unregulated utilities, you're kind of at the whim of what your city government or borough government wants to do. But we'll talk about what to do about that. Okay, so tenants' rights. Not a ton in Pennsylvania, but what you do have is you have the right as a tenant, if service is not in your name, if it is the landlord, even if it's your responsibility to pay the landlord directly, or they just pay it and it's just included, non-specified in your rent, you have the right to maintain service for yourself and your household, even if your landlord just stops paying the bill. And you have that right, whether it's a PUC regulated utility or if it's one of the other co-ops or municipal authorities. I will say a lot of the municipal authorities are not aware that you have that right, but you do. So essentially, in order to maintain service, what should happen is they should give a 30-day notice on the door that says, these were your charges for the last 30 days. No past debt. You are not responsible for the debt of the landlord under any circumstances, no matter what they tell you. You're not. But you can pay just the last 30-day bill every month to maintain your service. You can withhold that amount from your rent. You're not paying it twice. If you would like to do that, I strongly recommend also talking to a landlord-tenant attorney at your local legal aid to make sure you're doing what you need to do communication-wise, paperwork-wise, record-wise to keep yourself out of trouble. But anyway, you can establish an account. You don't have to establish an account. You can pay month to month to maintain that service as long as you can keep paying month to month. If the landlord or owner asks the utility company to shut off service, the utility company is supposed to ask for documentation notarized by the tenants that say, yes, this is fine. It's probably not fine. So that is, if that happens, the utility should turn you immediately back on, then give you the proper notice and sort of go forward from there. The two laws I've had listed here, the first one applies to the PUC regulated utilities. The second one applies to everything else. The protections are essentially the same. There's a little bit of different wording in each one, but those protections apply regardless of who is providing the water, the electricity, whatever. Foreign load is one other protection you have that applies only to the regulated, so that's your Duquesne Light, any of the First Energy companies, UGI, wherever. That means that if you are in a multi-unit building, even if it's just 2 units, if you are a tenant, you cannot be charged for any common space usage. So, right, like if you have a first floor apartment, you should not also be paying for the washer and dryer in the basement if that's accessible, if that's not just your exclusive space. You should also not be paying for outside lighting. You should not be paying for hallway lighting. You should not be paying for water to the garage that the owner is using to run a business. You should only be paying for what you're specifically using. If you think that you are paying for something that you should not, that you are not actually using, the utility company, and again, these are just the regulated ones, call them directly. You can say, I would like a foreign load investigation. They will send someone out, they'll send a tech out, they'll flip a bunch of breakers on and off, they will unplug and replug things, they will figure out where everything is going, what meter is going to what, and if they determine that there is a foreign load, they have to place service back into the name of the landlord along with any debt on the account. And you as the tenant are not responsible for anything going forward until they fix the wiring and get it set. I will say this certainly does open people up to retaliation. You are protected from retaliation, but that doesn't mean it does not happen. So I always tell people, if you want to do that, absolutely do it. It is your right. Just know you probably also want to call a landlord-tenant attorney because they're probably going to try to unlawfully evict you. So just a heads up, always get a landlord-tenant attorney on the line if you can. But again, it's not up to the utility company. If you call them and they come out and they determine, they have to do it. Let's see. So again, how do you exercise your rights here? It's, I would say easy, but it's much easier with the PUC regulated utilities. We spend a lot of time in litigation making sure that they understand what tenants' rights are. So they know. They might screw it up, or they might have a property listed as owner-occupied and it's not, it's tenant-occupied. That happens a lot, especially as places are getting bought and going from owner-occupied to tenant-occupied. So it's fairly common that something would be coded wrong, but again, it should just be a phone call. You as the tenant should be able to call the utility company and say, hey, I'm a tenant, I'm not responsible for this bill, and I now have a shut-off notice. That should be pretty straightforward. If it's not, file a complaint with the Public Utility Commission. I'm sure they would be happy to help you. For a municipality, it's a little different because oftentimes they do not believe that any of the rules that apply to the regulated utilities apply to them, but they do. We've found great partnership with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. We have regional contacts. Our contact out here is phenomenal and has solved problems, same day that we wouldn't be able to do because we're legal aid attorneys and we're not as scary as the Attorney General's office. So I certainly recommend, try to talk to the municipality first. If you're not getting anywhere, and you may not, a call to the Attorney General's office we found has been incredibly helpful. They're quick, they understand the issues, and they're usually able to contact the solicitor, the attorney for the municipality and say, here's the law, it's on paper. And they say, oh, all right, okay, fine. So that would be my recommendation for that. And I think that is about all that I have. But I will take questions. I'm also tabling. So if you have individual questions, please come up and ask. We have a ton of resources on the website, a ton of resources. One-pagers, we have a whole advocate's guide you can request from us specifically, and I will just follow the recommendation for LIHEAP. Yes, it is extended until the 18th. Everyone should go apply for LIHEAP. Tell everyone to apply for LIHEAP. We know it's very, very, very scary at the federal level. We do not know what is going to happen next year, but we have it for the next 10 days. So use it. And that's it. And I'll take any questions.
Hi. My name is Lucy, and I work at a place called Community Human Services, and we help house folks who are experiencing homelessness or housing instability. And so we're often helping folks with utility stuff as well. And I am just curious, we have, unfortunately, a lot of folks who were housing in apartments, but they're still being charged a water fee or bill. Is there any legality around that that we should be more aware of? Because it just feels very sketchy every time they're charging for water when we're in an apartment. And the other big issue that if you have any insight on is there's so few assistance programs for if you are behind on water, and we're always seeking that. So.
Yeah, there's essentially nothing for water other than with the larger utility company, PA American, Aqua PA, and PWSA. They do have assistance programs and grant programs, but if you're in the municipality space, yeah, it's just, it doesn't exist. It existed briefly during COVID. We had sort of a water corollary to LIHEAP, which was incredibly effective, but of course that, just like LIHEAP would have to be reallocated for next year. So it's not gonna happen. But yes, if water is tricky, water is definitely tricky. I will say if you are in I'll say this, landlords can essentially pass on utility costs to their tenants however they see fit. There is nothing that regulates that in Pennsylvania. There are rules that they can't profit off it, but practically speaking, it's almost impossible to figure out whether that's happening or not. We also see a rise in what is called ratio utility billing, where they'll hire basically a third-party management company to do the billing, do the records, do all that, and pass that cost on to the tenants. It's hard to figure out what you're paying for because they're bundling a bunch of services together. But essentially that's legal. I will say, I will shout out Community Justice Project. I don't think they have anyone here, but they're great. They're also a statewide legal aid program. And if you think something's real hinky is going on with what you're being charged, they're a great first call. They can do class actions. They are great at investigations. We work specifically with utility companies largely. So if it's a third party, if it's a sub-meter, that takes it sort of out of what we do day to day. But, we're always happy to partner. So, even if you do call me, if it's not something we can do, we can find you the right office. But the upshot is they can kind of do what they want, and there's not a lot saying that they can't.
In the same vein, I have a slightly more specific question regarding RUBS billing.
Yeah.
If a building they've decided to go with RUBS billing, which is the ratio billing, are they allowed to charge for common area usage if they're using that format?
Yes, because
Okay.
there's really nothing that says that they can't.
Okay.
They're basically, what they're doing with ratio utility billing is they're taking the entire cost for the whole building, right? They're taking all the water that's being used, or all the electricity, all the gas, all the sewage bill, everything, trash costs, and just adding it all up and splitting it all up. And that is permitted. So if anyone feels like doing any lobbying, drafting a bill, that would be good. But yeah, currently it is what it is. And I know it's hard after the fact because it happens in lease renewals a lot because it's sort of, but check and see. When you're renting an apartment, renting a house, how your utility costs are passed to you is really, really, really important. And I think I didn't think about it when I moved the last time, and my gas bill is twice what it was in my last place. So I learned a lesson. But yeah, that would be my advice: is make sure you know who's charging you and how.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Dr. Elise Silva, who is the Director of Policy Research at the University of Pittsburgh Institute for Cyber Law.
All right, I'm going to be talking about AI and tenant screenings today. Woo, so exciting. I'll disclose that I'm not an equitable housing expert or a legal expert of any kind, but I do know a bit about AI and how it affects people and societies and industries. And so, yeah, that's where we'll start. First up, how is AI being used in leasing currently? The integration of artificial intelligence, AI, is a really significant shift in how housing providers have started evaluating potential renters, and a shift from the past. AI, as you might know, can now automate or enhance, and I always use the scare quotes when I talk about AI, the assessment of tenant applications. It can also do a lot of other things, like the increasingly automated industry of digital leasing agents and property managers that do anything from picking tenants to managing payments to like surveilling or like monitoring noise data from tenants. The uptick in AI usage in real estate, so like bigger than just renting, like all of real estate, has been staggering. In real estate, it was valued, AI in real estate was valued as at approximately $163 billion US dollars in 2022 as a sub-industry, and grew to $226 billion in 2024. So that's like a 37% increase, like huge. So like I said, I'm talking about AI and tenant screenings, a very kind of sub-issue here, but a growing one nevertheless. So how do these systems work? AI-driven tenant screenings function by analyzing a wide array of data points pertaining to rental applications, and then provide things like a report or a risk score to a potential landlord, right? That's supposed to inform the decision of the landlord. So this data typically includes traditional factors like credit scores, rental history, and income verification. But a lot of newer AI systems are also incorporating bigger background checks that encompass things like criminal records and alternative data sources like utility payment history, social media activity, and other stability indicators like job longevity. And the argument here is that these data points offer a greater understanding of an applicant's profile, right, on the one hand, but I think we all can kind of understand here together that it also raises really important questions about data privacy, and the potential use of data that might not be subject to the same regulatory scrutiny as things like credit information, right, has historically been. So there's a lot to consider when computers get involved with deciding who gets offered a lease. So how common is this? I talked a little bit about kind of the wider industry, but how widespread is the use of AI and tenant screening specifically? It's emerging. The data on where we are now isn't comprehensive, but according to one report, Screened Out of Housing by the Tech Equity Collaborative, and this was along with researchers from MIT, nearly 2/3 of landlords who were surveyed about this issue reported receiving tenant screenings that included AI-generated scores or recommendations. The same survey showed that a substantial portion of landlords, 37%, almost 40%, reported relying only on the algorithm's recommendation when making recommendations about applications. So this was research done in California. It has a substantial rental market, and this data was collected in 2024, and this is pretty much all I could find in terms of like really contemporary data about this. There are a lot of potential benefits that are kind of advertised as part of these services. A lot of reasons that a landlord might rely on the number or score that an algorithm system might spit out for them. These products are marketed as being faster and cheaper and fairer. They're marketed as being able to enhance efficiency and mitigate risk, right, to landlords. AI systems can very rapidly process large volumes of applications, verify applicant information, and conduct background checks quicker than it would be able to do so manually. AI, and this is true of any system, right, leverage vast data sets to identify all sorts of things. In this case, inconsistencies in applications for fraudulent activity, for instance, that could be very easily missed by human eyes. AI systems are often touted as being more data-driven and less subjective, right, than like a human decision maker might be, leading to more consistent and less biased decision making. This is based, though, on an idea that data is fair and numbers can't lie, right? That's like the kind of underlying assumption there. But whenever I'm talking about issues like this with audiences like you, I like to remind us all that no data set is perfect, and in fact, many are very limited. While conscious bias might not be hand-coded into these systems, historical biases may absolutely be present in the data sets the algorithms rely on. So while AI systems will do things faster and at scale, it might not always do things fairer. And if you get slapped with a lawsuit, if you're a landlord, they might not always do things cheaper either. For instance, one class action lawsuit contended that the Safe Rents algorithm disproportionately assigned lower scores to Black and Hispanic rental applicants compared to white applicants and discriminated against individuals who rely on housing vouchers to pay their rent, which has implications for the Fair Housing Act. The case resulted in a $2.3 million settlement, with SafeRent agreeing to cease using AI-generated scores for applicants using housing vouchers nationwide. All right, so a pretty big piece of litigation here. Lots of drawbacks that I've already kind of been hinting to using algorithmic systems. There are legal implications, right, to think about when employing these technologies. There are also ethical ones, like the lack of transparency. Many of these systems aren't inscrutable. So what I mean, they are inscrutable. So what I mean is that we don't know how they come to the decisions they do. Their own engineers don't know exactly how they come to the knowledge, the outputs they do. They're kind of black boxes. Second, the algorithms in use are often proprietary and shrouded in trade secrets. So this makes it really difficult to tell an applicant who is denied housing the specific factors that led to that decision if you're relying solely on this. Algorithms can be discriminatory, as we discussed. They have been shown time and time again to inherit and amplify biases present in historical data on which they're trained. So even if an algorithm isn't explicitly programmed to discriminate, the data it learns from reflects past discriminatory practices or social prejudices, and therefore can make unfair decisions. Another note, and I learned this in my research for this talk, is that some AI tenant screening tools offer like predictive analytics. So the ability to predict the likelihood of tenants defaulting on rent payments or violating the terms of their lease. And I'd like us to pause here and ask what the ethical implications are of making housing decisions based on predicted behavior rather than actual behavior. I mean, many of you have maybe seen the movie Minority Report, right? Like very much like that. So that leads us to ask ultimately who's culpable, right? Who is accountable when something goes wrong? When someone is unjustly assigned a high risk score, for example. Is the company who made the algorithm, liable? Is the human overseeing the applications liable? This is a huge issue that we haven't quite figured out, and an issue with AI in general, actually. So, well, I'm not saying whether you should or shouldn't use the tools. I just want anyone who is using them or might be consulting with somebody who would use them to be informed about the risks that are inherent in them. So here are some good, I think, measures, best practices when you're approaching AI and tenant screening. One, do your due diligence. Carefully research and vet companies and tools to understand their methods, data sources, and potential biases. If possible, seek out companies that offer some customization and allow for human oversight. Ask if the data the algorithm used has been audited by an independent third party for discriminatory impact. Second, develop comprehensive written tenant screening policies. They should be easily accessible on all applications, articulate the specific criteria that will be used to evaluate applications, including an explanation about how AI is involved in the process. 3, do not rely on the AI-generated recommendation or risk scores when making final decisions, right? So there should always be a human in the loop. Human oversight is essential. Implement a process of human review, especially if someone is flagged as high risk or borderline as an applicant. And then finally, make sure you establish clear, well-defined, and easily accessible appeal processes for applicants denied housing. This should allow them the opportunity to provide additional context or data, right, or explain any negative information that may have been flagged by the AI. So my takeaway here is that AI is emerging. Proceed with caution. Thank you.
All right. So our final speaker is Charlize Smith, who is the founding executive director of Willis's Agency for Vision and Empowerment, or WAVE.
Ooh, good. Is it morning, afternoon?
We're still morning.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I just had a knee replacement, so please forgive me. My name is Charlize Smith. I am the founder and executive director of WAVE, Willis's Agency for Vision and Empowerment. We are a PHFA HUD housing counseling agency. Walisa was my mother. She was murdered in front of me at the age of 3, so I wanted to create something to give back to the community. And because I have a broker's license and I'm very familiar with low to moderate income regulations when it comes to HUD housing, I figure instead of participating in the real estate world, I would put a lot of my focus and efforts on the nonprofit sector, advocating for families who are living in low to moderate income communities. One of the programs that we have is what we call our READY program, and that program stands for Recognizing Everything Ain't Done Yet. And the reason why I think that this is so important, as long as I've been in this industry, as long as I've been in the community of affordable housing, we have a lot of agencies that are extremely reactive when it comes to delinquent residents, when it comes to individuals facing homelessness, when it comes to individuals living in deplorable conditions. And the reason why we came up with this program is because we wanted this program to be a more proactive program. And so what we did was we built this program to work with partners in the landlord community so that we can provide proactive tools to prevent individuals from becoming homeless. During the pandemic, there was a lot of resources that was provided to help individual families to deal with a lot of the delinquent rent. And although those families were definitely housed, they were definitely prevented from being homeless, what we saw was that after they used their 18 months of resources, well, guess what happened? A lot of them ended up delinquent again. So now you have all these families who receive these resources, and now they don't have the tools in place to keep them in their homes. And so what we did was we created a cause and effect model. We received some resources from one of our private foundations, and we literally built relationships with the landlords. And we would literally allow these families to come up with payment plans that the landlords did approve. And once they approved these payment plans, we did not just drop the money onto their delinquent balances. What we did was we made them come into the office, get a one-on-one session with our housing counselors. We implemented life skills, and as well as we had a health coach, because what we realized is that there were quite a few indicators that showed that all three of these areas needed to be addressed so that we could get to the bottom line as to why you are continuing to be delinquent. We found that there were a lot of families who may have just needed a couple more $100 a month just to make their delinquent payment. We also found that there were families who were not in compliance with the 4350, meaning they were afraid to go to their landlords to let them know, hey, we are delinquent. We also found that there was a lot of landlords who were not executing the 4350 policies to make sure that these individual families were being justly rents, were being justly calculated according to their income and expenses. And so in that, we created this program, and we had a 95% success rate, right? We were able to keep these families in their home. We saw a shift in their mindset and their perspective on how they viewed themselves on paper, as well as how they viewed themselves in their housing conditions. And I sat here and I listened to a lot of the speakers and other speakers, and I commend us all for the work that we do. However, I think it's time for us to shift and come together and not to become enablers to some of the families who are receiving these resources. Because what we are doing is we're setting up these families to believe that they can continue to operate in these unhealthy habits, right? Because when we started digging into their income and their expenses and doing DTIs from a rental perspective, we saw that there were some patterns. They had the resources, but they were spending the money the way that they chose to. Or they were too afraid to go into the office and let the landlords know, hey, I lost my resources, what do I need to do? And we also have families who didn't even want to report the information because they had this extra money. They come from a trauma environment, and they figure, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this money, and I'm going to try to ride this thing out for as long as I can. So another one of the things that we do is we make sure that we align our families with a counselor. And this counselor literally gives them the opportunity to speak freely about their current financial conditions, right? We also have a home buying workshop program. We also have a pre and post home ownership program where we literally look at who these families are from a holistic approach and truly give them realistic goals and objectives in order for them to obtain home ownership. So we have had a pattern of families who may have started in the rental space and ended up in home ownership. And why is this so important? Because the reality of it is, most of the individual families that we serve are from the ages of 18 to 25 in the rental space, right? So this is the first time that they are having the opportunity to live on their own. They don't have a clue as to what they are doing. And then they find themselves in this situation becoming delinquent. And now they have to run and literally try to figure out, how do I get myself out of these situations? And what I believe and what our statistics show is that when you catch them prior to moving in, the success rate is greater than trying to literally pull them out of a situation that's almost impossible for them to get out. Right? So now that we know a lot of the resources are gone, and I'm not going to say who the agency is, I'm just going to give you the facts. There's an agency that received huge dollars of assistance for a lot of their residential families. Well, guess what? We just had to sign a partnership with them because they now have a $1.6 million delinquency rate. And 80% of the families are no longer eligible to receive assistance. That's a problem. That's a huge problem because we know that those individuals who receive these financial assistance, we were just putting a Band-Aid on top of the situation. And now that the Band-Aid has been lifted off, they're back in the same situation. And in order for us to transform the mindsets of the families, there has to be some policies in place that transform how we do affordable housing. Yes, we understand brick and mortar. I get it. But what about the individuals who are being placed in brick and mortar? How are you going to get the home ownership? We talk about the 44-something% of increase of black home ownership. How are we going to get the home ownership when individuals in our low to moderate income communities, when they first start having the experience on living on their own, they don't have a clue as what that process looks like, right? Some families may not be eligible or ready to move from affordable housing to home ownership. Some families need to move from affordable housing to tax credit. So they can understand once you lose your job, it's a wrap. You still have to pay that same rent amount. There was a OWN PGH, which is one of our major partners. There's quite a few families who are now facing foreclosure, right? And they received the assistance. So it's deeper than just placing these families in housing. It's deeper than literally giving them the key when they have not shifted the mindset in terms of what the responsibility is and unleashed and revisited some of the negative habits that they have developed in order for them to stay sustainable. We are literally building out a foreclosure prevention department because of the foreclosure rates that are literally rising due to accountability, due to purchasing homes outside of literally what you should not have purchased your home for. When we work with these families, we literally, just because the bank tells you that you are approved for $200,000, when we look at your spending habits, we're going to let you know, no, sweetheart, no, sir, you are only eligible for $150,000. Now, we can't force you to do anything, but what we are going to do is tell you the truth and hold you accountable for what you need to do in order for you to have true sustainable housing. So we believe through our READY program and through our home ownership program and through our life skills programs that we need to be more proactive than reactive. And we are definitely seeing a success rate. And to be honest, I'm just going to say it, a lot of people don't want to fund proactive. A lot of people want to fund reactive. Right? We want to, let's hurry up and let's deal with the issue. No, let's deal with the issue in the beginning so that we can learn how to resolve and truly help the homelessness crisis. We are exhausted at WAVE. We're exhausted. We get more phone calls from families who are getting ready to get put out, and it breaks my heart. And we look into the DHS system or we look into this system and say, hey, did you receive your resources? They've already used up the resources. So now we're scrambling, trying to figure out how are we going to keep this mom in her house, or how can we negotiate with the landlord? So now we got to get extremely creative to say, hey, Mr. Landlord, hey, Miss Landlord, if they participate in our program and if we keep them on a payment plan, can you please keep them in their home? That's how strategic that we have to be in order to really try to understand how to prevent this homelessness crisis. So if you're looking for more information, I just got appointed to the City of Pittsburgh Housing Authority. They gonna get it from me. I just got appointed to that board, because I need to understand what is going on in the City of Pittsburgh when it comes to this affordable housing thing. Something is not right, and I'm going to have a big mouth. Let me just say that. But you can contact us at www.waveoflife.org. I have business cards. I apologize for not having a PowerPoint, but I was up under anesthesia. But I showed up, and I just, want you to know that this is our hard work. This is what we do, and I'm very outside of the box, and we train our team to be that way. So we're here to partner with anyone who wants to partner with us. Okay.
All right, I think we've got time for one question if anyone has any questions? All right.
Okay.
Hold up, we got a mic coming.
Yes.
Thank you. You mentioned that you found 3 components to be really essential, and I thought I maybe caught them, but I thought I maybe had 2 of the 3. And I was wondering if you were able to maybe just repeat those back.
Absolutely. We have a life skills coach. This life skill coach, she's a therapist. She sits on our ready groups, and then if the client needs one-on-one therapy sessions, she provides them therapy sessions. We have a housing counseling coach who focuses on the financial piece, and then we have a health coach who focuses on the body piece of the individual families. And we found out that these 3 areas are extremely connected when it comes to affordable housing and just your living environment and why their homes are, maybe in a deplorable situation. We got pictures of families living with rodents, like big rodents, right? So yes, those are the 3 components. Mm-hmm.
What's your service territory? Are you Allegheny?
We are Allegheny. We are all over. Again, we're PHFA and HUD certified, so we can cover all of Allegheny County. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you again.
Thank you.
So at this point, if we can hang on here for one more minute, I'm going to invite all of our speakers to come back up on the stage. We have just a small token of appreciation for you, so please come on up. Don't be shy. We are so thankful for all of you for sharing your expertise, your work, and for all the work that you do. So thank you. All right, and let's, thank you so much, Rachel and David. Okay, and if we can maybe get together for a picture in just a moment. And with that, I'm going to thank you all for joining us for this session. We are going to transition to lunch next, so that's going to be down the hall in Kings Garden 4 and 5. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.